Welcome to another edition of Journey of Hope. True stories of real people going through life. You wake up one morning and everything's going fine, and then something happens that suddenly changes the direction in which your life is going. Our special guests today are Don and Connie Blanton from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and they've got a very interesting story to share. It's good to have you here, Don and Connie. We want to learn a little bit about you. We got people from all around the country that are watching. So tell us a little bit about where you're from and about your educational experience. Where were you born?
Well, we're currently living in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We've been there for 20 years. We're originally from North Carolina, a little town called Forest City, North Carolina. Connie and I are both from the same hometown.
Same place.
Yeah, but we met in college, and that was at Western Carolina University. And it'll be a couple of weeks from now. We'll be married 43 years.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
43. So you went to the same high school.
We went to East Rutherford High School in Forest City.
Both born in the same area, same town?
About a mile apart from each other, but
Really?
didn't know each other while we were growing up. It wasn't until college we met. There's three years difference. Okay. I was a senior, she was a freshman.
Okay, so did you know him at that point?
You always know the seniors, and he played football.
So he was one of the jocks around.
Right,
Yeah,
so I was aware of him.
Okay, so then you graduated from high school, and then what?
After graduating from high school, I went to Western Carolina, where I studied business administration. I majored in marketing. After that, I spent a couple of years in the Marine Corps. And
did you go overseas?
I did not. I stayed stateside.
Okay.
Very fortunate with my assignments. And then after my tour of duty with the Marine Corps, I came back to Western Carolina, where I got a master's in business administration.
So was this in the 60s then?
Yeah, this was 1969 to 71 was when I was in service, and then 71 I came back.
Well,
and
Vietnam was still on at that point.
Oh, certainly was.
So
yeah,
fortunately you're over in the stateside. So when you graduated, you went back to school again then?
When I graduated after the Marine Corps, I went back and got my master's degree in business administration.
Okay. And then where'd you go for that?
Western Carolina.
Same place?
Same place.
Okay.
That's when I actually met Connie.
Okay, so she already knew who you were, but she was just a little freshman.
I didn't know her. I was actually introduced to her by a mutual friend of ours who was also from our hometown, and we were in a cafe, campus cafe called the Townhouse, and we were sitting at the table together, and Joel, our friend, introduced me to Connie, and one thing led to another, and I said, "Where are you from?" And she said, "Forest City," and I said, "No, you can't be." And so the conversation
How big is Forest City?
About 8,000 people.
Oh, it's a small area then. Wow. So did your families know each other?
They did. They knew each other and had known each other for a long time.
And how far apart were you in terms of geography?
Oh, about a mile and a half.
No kidding. So you were in school. What were you taking?
My degree was in home ec, interior design, and I took all my electives in the School of Business. My true love has always been math, and I had a custom drapery business and design business, and also then after a while I went into accounting, and my last job was as a controller with a home builder.
So you took home ec, had a lot of minors. You loved math.
I did.
It was not my favorite subject, I can tell you that right now.
Mine either.
And then you graduated, but then you got into some work along the way where you're using your math background.
Right.
And you were actually a controller then. Okay, and how long did you work there?
Oh, I was there probably about 10 years. And then we moved to Albuquerque, and I never went back to work.
Okay, well, you mean you never went back to get paid for your work?
Right, I never worked outside the home.
Yeah,
He keeps me busy.
Oh, I'm sure that he does. So you graduated, and then after you got your MBA, what were your plans at that point?
Well, actually, after I got my MBA, I went to work for a little firm that was owned by Fran Tarkenton, the professional football player in Atlanta, Georgia. It's called Behavioral Systems Incorporated. They did primarily training programs, management development programs, and I was fortunate enough to have gotten work with that company in Atlanta. Connie and I lived in northern Georgia in a town called Gainesville, where I worked in the textile industry.
That's north of Atlanta, isn't it?
North of Atlanta,
Okay.
Gainesville in northern Georgia, it sure is. And again, it was a great experience. But
What were you doing?
I was called a management consultant,
Okay.
so that opens the door for a
all
lot of
kinds of
possibilities.
possibilities.
But the reality of it was we were offering training programs in what was at the time kind of a science and an art of behavioral reinforcement or positive reinforcement for doing the right thing in the textile industry. We taught frontline supervisors, middle-level managers how to recognize good performance and then reward for that
Really
good
catch them in
performance.
the action.
Exactly.
Really?
And the rewards could be as simple as a thank you or a pat on the back or a cup of coffee, or could be monetary, but more than not, it was just to recognize that if you reward someone at the point in time when they're doing the right behavior, the chances of them repeating that behavior are much higher, as opposed to punishing someone when they're doing something wrong. That's negative reinforcement, and that
So
doesn't work.
this was back in the 70s then?
Yeah, this was early 70s.
This was way ahead of the game then.
Actually, it was.
Yeah.
And I felt very fortunate to have been doing that type of work. And to do it at the time, there were a lot of textile companies in the Southeast, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina. So that was primarily our target market, was working with textile manufacturers, helping them
So you go
increase
around to
productivity.
different places then
Exactly.
and instill some of these concepts into the company there.
Exactly. So it took advantage of not only my education, which was my MBA was in management, general management. My undergraduate was marketing, but my graduate was industrial management. So it let me take advantage of some of that with just my kind of normal inclination to think on the positive side.
Great. So how long did you do that?
The interesting thing about a year and a half.
Okay.
And then a lot of folks won't remember that, but 1972, 73, we were hit with a big recession.
Big
a very,
time
very big
gas
time.
crisis also.
Gas lines, exactly. Last hired, first fired. Company downsized. I found myself unemployed.
MBA and out of work.
Recent MBA who
Yeah.
really felt like he's going to set the woods
change
on
the world.
fire.
That's right.
And all of a sudden, I got a pink slip. So from there, I started firing off resumes, and one resume led me to the employer that I stayed with for almost 30 years, and that was in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. At the time, the contracting officer was not Lockheed Martin, but it was Union Carbide. So I became an employee of Union Carbide, but in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, at the Oak Ridge Gaseous Diffusion Plant, which is part of the Department of Energy's facilities.
Right there.
In Oak Ridge, yeah.
Okay. That's
Very-
Oak Ridge what?
Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
Tennessee, all right.
Very fortunate to have become employed. Didn't think that I would stay in that field for
Kind of a
ever.
stepping stone, possibly.
Yeah, I thought
is
it
what
was
you
kind
think,
of, but as it turned out, Connie and I liked the area. We liked the people. I liked the work. And so one thing led to another, and I just ended up looking back 30 years later, and that was my career, which I was very fortunate. I retired from Sandia National Labs in Albuquerque as Vice President of Human Resources and Protective Services, which includes things like environmental safety and health, security.
How long were you there?
10 years at
10
Sandia
years.
National
So
Labs.
you moved from the South then. How was that? I mean, once a Southern, always a Southerner.
Well, I would have thought I would have ended up maybe spending a couple of years in the Southwest, which is New Mexico, and then go back to the Southeast, which is our home. Everybody talks.
So all your family's back there.
Everybody talks like us, you know.
Right,
So
yeah, normal talk, right.
Normal talk.
No accent.
That's right. But having said
So
that,
you worked in Albuquerque, and what were you doing? You're in HR?
I went as the Director of Human Resources, and again, I retired as the Vice President of Human Resources.
Okay, and how big a plant are we talking about?
About 12,000 employees. So it's a large facility, a large operation, and very highly technical, a lot of nuclear, robotics, energy-related fields.
You know, I think we've had some patients from that area.
Actually, there have been several who
what
have
I'm
gone
thinking.
through the facilities through the proton treatment.
Right.
Who were one is, if I can mention names,
Yeah.
Jeff Philbin, a good friend of mine, fellow golfing friend.
So you guys worked in the same area.
As well, we
Right.
both worked at Sandia Labs, and Jeff actually had his diagnosis of prostate cancer just about a year to the day before mine. So he actually came out to Loma Linda and was
So
able to...
Sandia Labs, what do they do? What is that all about?
Sandia Labs operates facilities for the Department of Energy. About 50% of it is related to the nuclear complex, nuclear weapons complex. So maintaining the nuclear stockpile for the country, maintaining all of the systems associated with the nuclear stockpile. And then the other part has to do with advanced research in areas like robotics, working with the military, doing work that is a lot of work that's highly classified, as you
I
might
was going to
imagine.
say a lot of really technical
Yep.
and classified stuff going on
But,
there.
but also energy and environmental research goes on there. Just a lot of really special programs. But majority of it is work that's done for the Department of Energy.
Okay, so everything's going along fine. You guys have been married now 42 years, so
Yep.
a couple of years ago we're talking about 40, 41 years, and then some health issues came up. But tell me, you had a little bit of background. Didn't your father have some problems?
Yeah, my dad, when I was growing up, and is actually, it's while I was in college, actually, Dad developed, and we didn't talk about it a lot at the time, but I knew he had received a diagnosis of cancer, which frightened me to no end, my mom as well. I later learned it was prostate cancer. This is about 40 years ago.
Yeah,
This-
people didn't talk. They had cancer, didn't
Exactly.
say what kind it
This
was.
is a long time
People
ago.
never talk about prostate cancer.
My dad and I certainly didn't share any of the details associated with that conversation, but I do know that in his case, he had surgery. And that was, I don't know if there were other options afforded to him at the time.
Not too many at 40 years
but,
ago.
But he had surgery. I know he also had radiation therapy associated with that, which was a pretty harsh treatment for him, because I can remember seeing him go through some really tough times when I would come home and see how Dad's a physically strong man, but he's weakened by the...
By the overall treatment.
Exactly, by the treatment he's receiving. He ended up having some side effects of incontinence and I'm sure
probably some other ones, yeah.
other problems, no question. But having said that, that really kind of formed a strong and
So then in the
lasting
back of your
impression
mind,
in my mind.
Now, did you know his parents?
Yes. In fact, we had just been married about 2 years when this happened with his
Okay.
Yeah,
dad.
Connie would visit and see Dad, and again, Dad ended up living about another 20 years and died of a completely unrelated.
else,
Yeah.
yeah. But
So
he had
the
the symptoms the
the cancer was taken care of, apparently, but all the side effects and other
Issues that
came up going through the treatment and the therapy
Yeah.
were just horrific as far as I was concerned. So knowing that children, male children of prostate cancer, that there's a higher incidence that I might get it one day. So I started doing my research early on. Now, I didn't do really research back then, but I was sensitive to it, so I certainly had my PSA exams every year, starting at that point, and I went all the way up through to present. So I've never missed an annual
So you
PSA.
started very early because you're aware of what had happened with your father.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I wanted to be able to at least identify and try to catch something early. So was able to at least do that.
So now, but you had a friend that had been here apparently somehow. You
Yeah,
had some
yeah,
contacts.
it's interesting, and this has been about 10 years ago, I guess, Lynn. I had a friend, his name's Frank Bice, and Frank was a golfer.
You're a
we didn't actually golf that often in the same group, but some other fellows that golfed with us golfed with Frank, and so I'd get to see him. And as I was golfing with my other friends, just in the course of conversation, it came up, did you know Frank had been diagnosed with prostate cancer? And I said, oh my goodness, no, didn't have any idea. And he said, yeah, and noticed that he wasn't around. I hadn't seen him.
Now let me stop just right there. He's a golfer, isn't he?
He is a golfer.
And I understand that he's had a hole-in-one.
He's had 4 hole-in-ones.
I wanted to bring that out. 4
I know very well.
hole-in-ones.
I dust them every week.
Every week. Got 4 trophies. All right. I had to bring that out.
Needless to say, I'm a very lucky man in more ways than one.
That's right. There's people that are lucky and people that are good, and then there are people that are good and lucky. Combination. All right. So anyway, what's happening then?
I found out that Frank had gone to California. Again, this is about 10 years ago. He'd gone to California for treatment for his prostate cancer. I didn't know anything about Loma Linda at the time specifically. I had heard about proton radiation therapy, but I hadn't really associated with a facility or whatever. But anyway, I said, well, that's interesting. A few months later, Frank's back. He's back out on the golf course. Welcoming him back, saying, gosh, it's so good to see you. You look great. You just got back from cancer treatment? And Frank says, yeah, we had a great time. You know, sunny California.
You don't think of people having cancer treatment having a great time.
No,
yeah.
but that was his words. Said we had a great time. I said, really? So he goes on to tell me the Loma Linda story about his experience and about now how he's cancer-free. He's cured. And so to me, that's another lasting impression.
Just kind of in the back of your mind.
Oh, yeah. Well, at that point, then is when I started my research about what is proton radiation therapy, and only to find out there were other people in the area, other people that I knew very well who had gone through the same type of situation where they're diagnosed, came to Loma Linda. And in one case, it was actually a fellow who went to another proton facility, but most had come to Loma Linda. And I just acquired, as I acquired more information, I said, these are people, if I ever get diagnosed with prostate cancer, I want to really glean from their experience. I didn't interview them or talk to them in detail at the time, but I became more and more aware that this wasn't just one isolated instance. There's a lot of guys out there who are going through this.
So the day finally comes when you have a rise in PSA, and then what happened?
When, again, I get the annual PSAs, my urologist noticed a pretty significant, my PSA itself was relatively low, 4.83.
Which is not all that high.
But it had just been the year before down in the 2s, so it had jumped significantly from 2.5 to 4.83 in a year's time. Obviously very concerning. My urologist said, need to do a biopsy, did the biopsy. Cancer showed up in 3 of the 4 quadrants. And so then it's time to present the options of, you know, what
the different type of treatments
what type of treatment do I want to go through?
Now, how were you affected when you found out he had cancer?
Well, again, since it was hereditary, we weren't really surprised, but I didn't expect it so at such a young age, I guess.
Yeah.
I thought we had 10 more
early.
years. But,
Yeah.
but you know, I helped him with the research and
Wives often are the ones that
Yeah.
do a lot of the research.
She did a great job. Yeah.
So anyway, you ended up coming, you made contact finally with Loma Linda.
Did.
And you came here, and tell us about your experience when you were here at Loma Linda.
Well, again, in talking with my friends in Albuquerque and other places who had been through Loma Linda, I knew that Loma Linda had this philosophy of treating the whole person.
Making man whole.
Making man whole. I kind of knew what that meant, but I didn't really know what it meant. But I did understand that it's more than just the radiation treatment
Well,
itself.
for our listening audience, Loma Linda has an undergirding philosophy of making man whole, treating the whole person, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and that's what you're talking about,
That's
Don.
exactly right.
So
That's exactly right.
when you came here, what did you discover?
That all of that is true and then some. It is the Loma Linda experience of of all the aspects of treatment. And I had heard about the lectures series, the potluck dinners with other patients and their spouses, the restaurant tours, the physical aspect with the Drayson Center and what a marvelous facility it is.
That's our wellness center,
That's
right?
Exactly, just an unbelievable facility here in Loma Linda. And also the spiritual side of health and healing and just development, all kind of were bundled together. And quite frankly, Lynn, I know this is your interview, but you get a lot of credit for packaging all of that in a way that us patients could see it and understand how it all fit together. It's not like four disjointed pieces thrown at you. It all can work together for making man whole.
Well, you know, many times I'll say the treatments take place in gantry 1, 2, or 3, or the horizontal beam. But healing is a process, much more than just showing up for the treatment. So what were you doing all this time? Were you just sitting at home twiddling your thumbs, or
No.
what were you doing?
There were, last year there were about 30 other men going through the same treatment. So the couples were at all these events. So we met some fabulous people, and we would be with them Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday nights, and then you would make a special friends and go out for pizza with them on Friday on your own. So there was just, it was a wonderful experience.
So lifelong friendships are made. There's no question about it.
Yes,
No
being
question.
with all those people and getting to know them and knowing they were going through the same thing you were going through.
Well, and I appreciate it. We're going to be having a reunion in Albuquerque coming up, and
That's
you're going to
correct.
help host that at the Presbyterian Church there.
That's
I want
right.
to say the Sandy Presbyterian.
Sandia.
Presbyterian
Sandia Presbyterian
Church,
Church, and that's my home church, but we'll be having, that's March the 8th, 2015, and hopefully we'll have a good number of former proton
We got a number
patients.
of people in that area. So now that you've had cancer, now that you've treated, and this was about a year ago,
Right.
And your PSA, did it drop down?
Yeah, like I said, it was 4.83. After the final treatment, it's 4 months after that you do your first PSA. It dropped from 4.83 to 0.85.
Wow, what a wonderful response.
And then 6 months later, which was just a few weeks ago, I had my 10-month evaluation or PSA, and it had dropped down even further to 0.53. So
Wonderful.
it's just fantastic.
So what difference now that you've had cancer, you've gone back home? Having cancer, has it made any difference to the two of you?
Oh, it's made a lot of difference. It certainly makes you not aware of, but very relevant and significant, your mortality. I mean,
You hear that clock of mortality ticking.
Right. We all know that we're only on this earth for a short period of time, and we don't know when the clock stops.
But it's always in the future.
It's always in the future. This brings it up and puts it right in your face to say, okay, could be tomorrow, could be any time. And that's a little bit disconcerting, but then it's not. If you put it all in perspective, it helps you to, be much more aware and then deal with that reality in a constructive, positive way. And that's what we've tried to do.
Sure. So going back home now, you were telling me you've been involved in something in helping patients. What are you doing? You're kind of an ombudsman?
I'm an ombudsman for the state of New Mexico in the long-term care division, and I'm the resident's advocate at a nursing home. So I go by once a week and go to their residence
As a volunteer?
council as a volunteer.
That's wonderful. And you were telling me that even since you were active in church before, but it's made a difference since you've had the cancer.
Yeah, it's been more, again, and don't wear it on my sleeve, but I have felt a stronger need to be more active on the spiritual side. And again, always been active in church. We always attend church, but I now have a Wednesday morning Bible study class that I didn't have previously, in order to be able to, you know, make sure that I'm digging deeper, if you would, into the Scripture. Also, I'm active with our outreach committee, chairing the outreach committee for our church. And the outreach committee, again, is not only involved with getting non-members to become members of your church, it's, to use the term, feeding the flock. It's to make sure that those people who are already there at the church, but who may not feel connected or actively
growing
involved,
in Christ,
are growing as well. And so that's helping me grow, to be more actively engaged with that. So I just appreciate the opportunity to be able to do those additional things, which I wasn't doing prior to Loma Linda.
Well, Don, you and Connie have had a great experience. I want you to look into the camera right now, and people are looking on. What would you tell them if they've just been diagnosed with any kind of cancer?
Sure.
Look into the camera.
Well, I would
on
say
this one here, yeah.
Each person has their you know, own way of dealing with things. I had mine, you'll have yours. But the one thing I would say is, don't be totally pessimistic. Accept the reality of the diagnosis, but then recognize that's not the end of life by any means. There's all kinds of options and possibilities available to cancer patients, and do your research. Look and see what's available. Certainly, if it's an initial diagnosis, you may want to have a second opinion, because what you find is there's all types of different assessments, evaluations once you get that original diagnosis. But then try to be as optimistic, upbeat, read, study, talk to friends, talk to neighbors. Don't isolate yourself, because I think that isolation could be the worst possible thing you could do after a diagnosis.
That's great counsel that Don has given to you. Don and Connie are examples of people that are not only survivors, but they're thrivers. This matter of having cancer was a little bump in the road, and they moved on beyond. Each one of you, right now, I can tell you without knowing anything about you, God's got a plan for your life. And if you'll look to Him and put your trust in Him, He'll open and close doors. He's got a bright future plan for you. Look to Him, put your trust in Him, and He'll lead you all the way. See you next week.